Hi, Dr. Paul Donovan here, and today we're talking about your use of power and how to make sure that you use your power well in connection to conflict. So power is, as you know, a really central part of being a great leader. And as we know, using power is very sensitively correlated to how you deal with conflict. It's a critical part of using your power well, but in ways that might surprise you. Now, we're going to be looking at Dr. Julie Diamond's work in this video on one of the 7 scales she identified to be a very sensitive read to how leaders use power. And across all that global data that she amassed over some time with her and her team, she discovered that really good leaders who use their power well are conflict competent versus conflict averse. And that's the scale we're going to be looking at now. Now, you don't have to necessarily get your 360 done, or I'd recommend it. I don't have any financial take in whether you get a 360 done or not. But today, even if you haven't done your profile, you can learn a lot about how to be more conflict competent versus conflict averse. So first of all, if you are conflict competent, then you'll be someone who engages in conflict, who mediates disagreements, and who actually facilitates difficult conversations. That's what I mean by conflict competent. That's what I mean by competent. And the scale measures the degree to which you are conflict competent does that. So already I'd like you to think about it. This is a tricky area for managers. Are you someone who does facilitate difficult conversations, who mediates disagreements with others, who engages in conflict? This is what we're talking about now. And so we're going to have a look at the scale. And if you're someone who is conflict averse, you're being someone who is avoiding taking decisions in areas that are controversial. You may be experiencing someone who's dithering in areas where there's interpersonal conflicts or interpersonal tensions. And that's actually in many, and my own research shows this, in many areas where teams and businesses need to act where they don't, they're actually withholding their actions because of associated interpersonal tensions. So you may be dithering in areas where you associate such tensions to be present. If you are experienced in the middle, you do step in, but you're taking a little long to do it. Others are suffering because of your inability to step in when you sense it's there. But ultimately you do. Or if you're experienced as conflict competent, you're someone who not only steps in when you need to, but you're being called on to mediate difficult conversations or differences. Is that you? Are you being called on? Or are you being someone, on the other hand, who is experienced as actually dithering or not acting soon enough in problematic circumstances? So have a little think now. Draw a little line across and consider where on this scale might you be. And now we're going to go to, first of all, why this is a misuse of power. It's an odd one because those of us who are conflict averse don't often think of ourselves as powerful. But in fact, we're using our power, we're using the rank given to us through our role to avoid. It's an active use of power. We're just using our power to avoid conversations which we may associate to be personally threatening or uncomfortable in some way. That's a misuse of power. If you had less authority, less power, then you may not be able to avoid it. You actually faced up with dealing with the person you have difficulty with because you've got to get information from them every day. And you may be more, as it were, in your face. But the more rank you have, the more able you can distance yourself from those difficult conversations and avoid them. And that, my friend, is a misuse of power. You don't feel powerful, but you're using power to give you relief from uncomfortable feelings. Okay, that's why it's a misuse of power. So let's have a look. What do you get? What are the outcomes you'd get in relation to these? Obviously, if you're conflict averse, then you'll discover that difficult situations can foster. You'll actually have malaise. People start to get less energized, and undercurrents can spread unchallenged. If, on the other hand, you're conflict confident, wow. Disagreements become a source of productivity, and even difficult conversations can be a source of terrific engagement and intimacy. So you've really got a team there that, if in conflict competent teams, who are really experiencing this radical humanity of vulnerability in conflict. So, and that's what you can create if you are a leader who's using your power consciously. Okay, so let's keep going. What can you do now? Okay, I know there's a lot of words on the screen right now. You may even like to pause me right now so that you can read it. But if you are someone who is experienced as conflict averse, just starting to look at your mindset, have a think about, what do you associate with actually talking about conflict? Do you consider there could be catastrophic outcomes? When you imagine yourself stepping in to talk about conflict, you may think that something bad will happen. And I want to ask you, what bad things do you think might happen? Take a moment to write those down. Have a look at your belief structures around conflict. Those belief structures right now are guiding you to avoid conflict, but those belief structures are probably unexamined by you. So, pause and examine them. Write down, if I were to step in, if I was to initiate a conversation where there's tensions, what I suspect might happen that I don't want would be. List them out. Write out the things you are scared of occurring, and then consider, what does this tell me about my beliefs of conflict? For instance, do you believe if difficult conversations come up, it will get out of hand and it will get much worse? If you have that belief, it may not be serving you as a leader. Your team is going to be, you're suppressing the performance of your team. Because as a leader, you are obliged to step into tense conversations. All right. So then, if you're still down this end, then I'd like you to consider, find small niggling conflicts that are not too big. And consider that maybe you could help someone, just little things, step in to support them. Just read about this area and take in some tools. In fact, I'm going to share with you a tool in just a minute. If you're halfway through, then I'd like you to practice noticing the conflict in your team and step in sooner rather than later. Raise your concerns with people simply and directly. This is the territory of three-part iMessages. Consider, what behavior is someone doing that you find problematic, and what feelings do you have around it, and what are the unwanted implications on you of their behavior. Practice raising those. They're actually conflict prevention tools, but I know that you'd be stepping into your own tension to raise it. And indeed, if you've got two people in your team who have tensions with each other, then support them to write down very clearly what behavior they have of each other that they find problematic, what each person feels when they see the other person do it, and what the tangible impact on them is, and have them share that with one another. These are some of the tools that you can bring in so that you can help your team work with the small tensions. If they're really big, long-term personal conflicts, don't go there yet. You might need more help. Get a facilitator to someone help. But if there's smaller tensions between two people that haven't been around for too long, then that is a very right place for you to practice your skills as a conflict-competent manager or leader. Okay, now if you're already conflict competent, wow, you can go to this next step. Here is where you can develop increased tensions around conversations that your team have, where you sense that it's hard for them to go to certain areas. Maybe topics where you sense they're edging away or not speaking about things in the way that you suspect they need to. So this is the really nuanced work that a conflict-competent leader will do. And I would suggest that you might practice this. Name a topic that you suspect there is some tensions or subtle avoidance in your team. Draw one circle and write the easy thing to say about that topic, just in a few words, and then draw another circle and write what you suspect some members of your team might sometimes feel they'd like to say, but probably don't. When you bring your team together, you might like to show them your homework. Say, there's a topic, I suspect it's easier for us to say this because I've heard some say before. What I suspect some may not say but could feel is this. And then ask for feedback. Now, sometimes the thing that they're finding harder to say are aspects about your own performance as a leader. That's a ripe topic to avoid as a team member. So you might like to consider that if you're not sure what it is in that circle. Of course, you can always ask them, and if they trust you enough, they'll tell you what's difficult to say. And as a conflict-competent leader, using your power to create forums where difficult conversations can be done, well, then that's where you can help your team hold the polarities of what's called the mainstream voice or the marginalized voice. To say the things that are easier to say about a topic, the things that are a little harder to say about a topic. Holding those two voices together at the same time, and then asking what insights can we emerge when we do hold them without letting one voice shut down the other, and what actions lead from there. So there's a little hint for those of you who are already ready to take on more if you're a conflict-competent leader. All right, here's a wonderful little exercise to wrap this video up that you might like to do right now. So you'll notice there's a vertical and horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, you might like to put frequency of contact, and on the horizontal axis, your level of safety. And that is, how safe do you feel? Do you feel like you can say anything to those people that who are more safe with? Or do you feel you're walking on eggshells and a little more uncomfortable and watching your P's and Q's with those who are further down this end of the line? And then I'd like you to consider, how frequently do you see them? Is these people you see every day, over high conflict, or some people you only see once a month? Consider what the frequency of contact. Now, plot your team, the safety, that is the level of safety you have versus the frequency of contact you have. You may never have put those two together, but I'm going to ask you to do it now. And I want to acknowledge my great colleague and teacher, Dr. Carlos Ramondi, who taught me psychodrama many years ago. He introduced to me this wonderful, simple tool and a lens through which to see the relationships in which I'm working and living. Now, as a leader, I want to ask you, as someone who's conflict competent or conflict averse, are there people who you do not feel like that you have very much safety with, and you're dropping your frequency of contact, perhaps because you don't feel comfortable? Do you as a leader have an obligation to lift that lift that frequency of contact? Maybe you need to give them feedback a little more frequently than you do, but you're avoiding that because you don't feel entirely safe. It's a really critical question, isn't it? Maybe there's people you feel safer with, who you have a lot of contact with, but you probably don't need that much contact with. And you may even be setting up unwittingly cliques and other problems in your teams because you see them a lot and you just like to hang out with them. Well, they are very, very important things to be conscious of. You may need to drop your frequency with them a little bit. You maybe find yourself unconsciously drawn to them because you feel safer, but it's not competent to be with them as often as you are. All right, so I'm giving you a lens through which to look at your relationships with people that you work with so that you might notice where you might be in avoidance. You can use this particular grid to look at all sorts of things, but in this context, are there people you're avoiding that you have an obligation to be with? All right, and to give feedback to and to see regularly and to create those forums with them. So thanks everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this short video on being conflict competent versus conflict averse. It's a wonderful way to learn how to use your power better to create more life-giving, insight-providing conversations, to lean into difficult conversations and to see the intimacy and the community that can be created when we do this. And don't use your power to avoid those uncomfortable conversations. Thanks everybody. I look forward to seeing you next. Check out the other videos and bye for now.